Hey guys, tonight we begin with the curious, ink stained, nose wrinkling world of ancient Egyptian scribes, the poor souls tasked with writing, rewriting, and re rewriting endless spells, prayers, and funerary instructions for mummies. Imagine being stuck in an eternal clerical job, but your clients are dead, your desk is in a tomb, and the air smells like burnt herbs and guilt. You're not chiseling pyramids or standing triumphantly beside pharaohs. You're hunched over a splintery table with bad posture and worse lighting, squinting at delicate papyrus that curls at the edges like it's actively judging your handwriting. You probably won't survive this. One missed stroke, and you could accidentally curse a mummy into eternal confusion. And trust me, nobody wants an undead bureaucratic complaint. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up long before sunrise, as the Nile mist still clings to the air like a damp scarf. The village is quiet, save for the occasional donkey argument. You stretch, crack your back, which sounds like someone snapping thin papyrus, and dress in your single linen tunic that now has ink blotches in 3 languages. Your job today: deliver 6 funerary scrolls to the temple of Anubis by noon and finish another 2 by nightfall. Also, do not spill ink on the priest's ostrich feather fan again. They will remember. The walk to the scriptorium isn't long, but you do have to sidestep a sun-baked crocodile skull that some merchant swears is good luck. Past that, it's all foot traffic. Chickens, tired teenagers carrying bricks, and one smug-looking cat perched exactly where you need to sit. The cat doesn't move. You sit elsewhere. Inside the scriptorium, the air hangs thick with the scent of ink, oil lamps, and a faint trace of frankincense. A fellow scribe sneezes loudly in the corner. No one says, "Bless you." You're all too busy grinding pigment with a stone mortar that's older than your grandfather's sandals. Here, every tool is sacred. Your reed brush is sharpened with the precision of a surgeon. Your inks: one black for most writing, one red for warnings and names of gods, are carefully mixed each morning. Black comes from soot, red from ochre, or sometimes ground up bugs. Or maybe both. No one really checks. Historians still argue whether scribes were true elites or glorified interns. One side claims they were respected for their literacy and religious knowledge. The other suggests they were mostly overworked nerds who got blamed when a pharaoh's soul got stuck in Duat traffic. Today you're copying portions of the Book of the Dead, specifically Spell 26, which helps the deceased not have their heart testify against them in the afterlife. Very important stuff. You accidentally draw the reed leaf hieroglyph backward and spend 10 minutes blotting it out with careful ink dabs while silently begging Osiris not to notice. Across the room, someone's chanting a spell aloud for spiritual alignment. They're doing it off key. You don't correct them. The last guy who corrected a priest is now being eaten by sacred beetles in some moral parable. Probably. Mid-morning, you take your break. This means nibbling on dry figs while massaging the cramps in your ink-stained fingers. A baboon outside makes aggressive eye contact while slowly chewing your lunch. That was your only fig. By noon, you're summoned to the embalming chamber. This is not your favorite place. You enter, bow low, and try not to breathe too much. The combination of resin, myrrh, and whatever that is makes your eyes water. The mummy on the slab was a minor noble who, according to rumor, once cheated in a sacred board game and got cursed with premature toe rot. You carefully slide your scroll into the wrappings near his chest cavity, right between the amulets and that weird beetle thing. A priest gives you a nod. This is the closest you get to performance feedback. You leave only to get stopped by an elderly temple assistant holding a scroll and a complaint. Apparently, the spell you wrote last week was too short. You remind them it was 87 lines. They say the last scribe did 92. You resist the urge to ask whether the dead guy really noticed the difference. Back at your desk, you begin another scroll. Your reed brush splits. You fix it. Your ink dries. You add wine. You smear the Horus eye glyph, and now it looks like a banana. You redo it. The cycle continues. By sundown, you finished 3 more scrolls, consumed exactly no more figs, and acquired a new ink stain across your knee. You clean your tools, bow to the senior priest, who doesn't look up, and trudge home in the dark, hoping your scrolls won't be eaten by rats overnight. And just as you lie down on your reed mat to rest, you remember you forgot to draw the solar bark on that last scroll. You groan, flip over, and dream of being reincarnated as a goose, preferably a rich one with no ink stains. You wake to the sound of a dung beetle thunking against your doorframe. Not metaphorical, an actual beetle. An ominous little reminder that your day will involve both rolling things and being covered in something unpleasant. It's barely light out. You stretch, crack your neck, and prepare for another morning of ink stains, crypt drafts, and judgmental priests. Breakfast is a few stale lentils, possibly older than the scrolls you're transcribing. You chew thoughtfully while your neighbor's rooster screams like it has personal issues. Today's workspace? The embalming chamber again. Lucky you. You shuffle in just as the latest client is being rearranged. It's Prince Najem, recently departed, known mostly for his bad poetry and worse tattoos. Now he's halfway mummified and surrounded by men in leopard skins muttering prayers. You try to avoid eye contact with the priest, sawing open the ribs. Not because you're squeamish, because he always asks you to hold something. Your station is set up in the corner. A low stool, a basket of tools, and your all-important inks. The black ink is a familiar mix. Soot from burned acacia, crushed into powder and bound with gum arabic. It smells faintly like regret and incense. Red ink is more exciting. Ochre mixed with water, sometimes wine, sometimes spit, sometimes something that might be crocodile urine. You stopped asking after the first time you gagged. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptian inks included animal products intentionally, or if that was just the consequence of brewing everything next to an open ditch full of sacred ibis poop. Either way, you hold your breath when mixing. It's safer. Your job this morning is to write out Spell 125, the all-important weighing of the heart, confession, onto fine linen strips. Not papyrus today. This noble wants deluxe service. You unroll the linen. It's damp. Of course it's damp. Everything is damp here, except your elbows, which are cracked from writing. The linen doesn't hold ink well. Your reed brush snags on the fibers, dragging a line that makes the word for justified look like the word for clumsy idiot, which ironically might also apply to your performance right now. Still, you press on. The smell of resin and natron makes your eyes water, which is not helpful when painting tiny feather symbols. Someone behind you sneezes directly into the canopic jars. You pretend not to notice. Across the room, a junior priest knocks over a bowl of sacred oil. Everyone freezes. The oil soaks into the floor like it's making a divine getaway. No one says a word. Then the priest pretends it didn't happen. You admire his commitment to denial. As the morning wears on, you finish 4 linen strips and begin affixing them to the mummy's chests. One goes under the amulet. One is nestled by the ribs. The last one you have to slide under his tongue. You whisper the appropriate incantation while trying not to gag. Prince Nejum's tongue looks surprisingly smug for a dead guy. You take a break outside. The air is hot, dry, and mercifully corpse-free. You sit under a fig tree and try to stretch your shoulders. Your fingers are stained crimson, red from ink. Your knees crackle when you stand. The life of a scribe is many things, but ergonomic is not one of them. A temple guard ambles past and mutters something about your posture. You do not respond. He once misspelled Ra as rat, and you've never let him forget it. He doesn't know you doodled it onto his shield. You return to the chamber to finish your task. The priest thanks you by gesturing vaguely in your direction. It might be a blessing, or indigestion. Hard to say. You nod anyway and begin cleaning your brushes, which now resemble chewed reeds stuck in tar. You think about quitting. Sometimes, maybe opening a date, stand by the river. But then you remember. Last week, your scroll helped a baker's soul pass into the fields of reeds. Or at least that's what they told you. It made you feel important, just for a moment. Scribes were thought to be the bridge between the seen and unseen, the written and the eternal. You don't get paid in gold, but you do get blamed when someone's soul gets stuck in a divine audit. It's a tough balance. The day ends with you hunched over another papyrus, this time copying spell fragments from a tomb wall. Your lamp flickers, your hand cramps. The ink smudges. A cat walks across your scroll. You sigh, one final line before bed. O you who bring the ferry boat, do not let this soul be turned away. You whisper it as you write, not just for the mummy, for yourself too. You head home in the dark, your fingers stained, your sandals worn, your scrolls complete. Just before sleep takes you, you wonder, if someone writes your burial spell one day, will they spell your name right? You wake up in the middle of the night, panicked. Did you forget to draw the falcon above the bay symbol on that linen strip? You lie there blinking into the dark, convincing yourself it's fine. Mostly. Probably. Definitely maybe. At sunrise, you're back at it, this time copying entire books of the dead onto scrolls longer than your social life. The client? An overly ambitious merchant who insists on having every possible protection and spell, including one that guards against bees in the afterlife. You're not even sure there are bees in Duat, but he's paying in barley, so fine. Your hand already aches, and you haven't even finished the chapter about not dying again after dying. The scroll stretches over 2 meters and is made of premium papyrus, which means it's thin, brittle, and prone to curling like a judgmental eyebrow. You've anchored the corners with river stones, but one edge still insists on flapping upward every time you breathe. By mid-morning, you've copied 47 lines of small, precise hieroglyphs. Each symbol needs to be exact. A missing leg on a scarab? Suddenly, you've summoned a dung beetle demon instead of a rebirth. An extra dot on a falcon? You've accidentally petitioned Horus to curse someone's eyebrows. The stakes are high. The ink is low. The ink cakes in the well, as it always does. You mix in a little water and hope it wasn't the Nile batch from last week that smelled like fermented fish. It's hard to tell anymore. Your sense of smell retired sometime around the third embalming. Historians still debate whether scribes developed any shorthand techniques or visual cheats. You've tried. But last time you abbreviated the Field of Reeds, the supervising priest misread it as Field of Rats, and a whole funeral had to be delayed for reblessing. That family still glares at you in the marketplace. As you write, a fly lands on your scroll. Not just any fly, the same fly, the one that's been tormenting you all week. It sits squarely on a hieroglyph depicting a man kneeling in reverence. Now he just looks like he's asking the fly for mercy. You swat, you miss, you smudge, you fix the smudge with a careful ink overlay. This takes longer than writing it properly in the first place. You contemplate your life choices. Next to you, another scribe sneezes and knocks over a jar of red ink. It pours across his scroll like divine wrath. He stares at it for a long time. No one says anything. He slowly stands up, walks out, and doesn't come back for 3 days. Lunch arrives, flatbread and onions. The onions taste like old sandals, but you're too tired to care. A temple acolyte steals your bread while you're adjusting your lamp. You vow to one day curse his name into a cartouche of endless nosebleeds. As the sun sets, you switch to painting. Certain sections of the scroll demand illustrations. You take out your fine reed pen, pray it doesn't split, and begin to sketch Osiris in all his green-skinned, crook and flail glory. You get halfway through his beard when a beetle crawls across your arm and you flinch. The result? Osiris now has a goatee. You debate whether to fix it. Then remember, this guy's scroll includes 3 separate beetle-related blessings. He'll be fine. An hour later, a priest inspects your work. He squints, taps one section with a crooked fingernail, and says, "This Ankh symbol looks tired." You resist the urge to say, "So do I." Instead, you redo it 3 times. By then, your hand is trembling like a startled ibis, and your eyes burn from oil smoke. You wrap the scroll gently and set it aside, whispering a brief apology to whatever gods you may have confused in the process. Back home, you sit on the floor, pop your knuckles like popcorn, and stare at the ceiling. You briefly fantasize about being reborn as a noble, maybe someone who orders scrolls instead of writes them. Then you remember nobles get buried with cats' knives, and sometimes you, if you say the wrong thing. You sigh, roll over, and let sleep take you. You dream of endless scrolls, dancing inkpots, and an owlglyph that keeps judging your life choices. You wake up to find you've been drooling on your elbow. And the first thought that hits you, you forgot to draw the boundary between the sky and the Nile. Again, you start the day with a fresh reed brush and a stale mood. The sun hasn't even cleared the palms, and you're already sweating in places no linen tunic should touch. Still, you trudge back toward the scriptorium, scroll case in one hand, existential dread in the other. Today, you're assigned to copy funerary passages onto tomb walls. Not scrolls, not linen, not even papyrus. Stone. Cold, uneven, dust-choked stone. Your knees pop audibly as you crouch beside the tomb's inner chamber. The wall surface is lumpy and pitted, which would be fine if hieroglyphs were meant to resemble wobbly cheese. You pull out your pigments and sigh. Red for names of power, black for standard script, and blue for the rare divine highlights. Assuming your blue pigment hasn't dried into an uncooperative chunk the size of your patience. A temple monkey watches you from the doorway. He's stolen a measuring string and now looks ready to either assist or declare war. You ignore him, like you do most things that threaten your sanity before breakfast. The first hour goes well. You etch the gods' names with near perfection, your hand gliding over the rough surface with just enough grace to impress a moderately blind supervisor. Then you hit a crack in the wall, a literal one. Your reed brush snags. The ink bleeds. Suddenly, the glyph for eternal rest now kind of looks like eternal indigestion. You dab. You scrape. You mutter apologies to Thoth, who probably has better things to do than audit your spelling, but you never know. Historians still argue whether tomb inscriptions were mostly for the gods, the dead, or for the scribe's own job security. You lean toward cover your bases as a philosophy. Add a few extra blessings just in case. Maybe slip in a prayer for more figs next week. After a short break where your lunch gets stolen by the monkey, again, you move on to the more decorative bits, stylized gods with long limbs and judgmental expressions. You've painted Anubis so many times, you could probably sketch him from memory using only your elbow. This time, he ends up with one ear slightly bigger than the other. It gives him a faintly lopsided charm. You consider fixing it. Then you remember you haven't been paid in 2 months and decide Anubis can live with it. An old priest enters and starts pacing behind you. You can hear him breathing. You can feel him breathing. You hate that you can feel someone else's breathing on your neck. He clears his throat. This line, he says, jabbing a crooked finger toward the part where you wrote, "Guide the soul through the western lands." Yes? It looks too casual. You blink. Casual? He nods solemnly. Make it more grave. You stare at him. He stares back. Then he walks away, robe swishing like a particularly judgmental curtain. You repaint the line in slightly taller glyphs and add an extra swirl to the determinative just to be safe. It now reads like a funeral announcement written by a poet with control issues. Mission accomplished. Later that afternoon, a dust storm kicks up outside. You try to cover your ink pots, but it's too late. Sand gets in everything. Your tools, your scroll bag, your shoes, your soul. You rinse your brush in vinegar and pretend the grainy crunch in your teeth is just yesterday's bread. By the time you're done for the day, your back is a tangled lattice of regrets. You've painted 4 gods, inscribed 27 lines of scripture, and consumed 0 protein. You stumble out into the dusk just in time to trip over the monkey's discarded string. You lie there on the sand, staring at the stars, and think, if you die right here, who's going to write your tomb inscriptions? And more importantly, will they give Anubis the right number of ears? That night, you dream of walls that never end, gods with spinning heads, and a monkey with your face stealing your ink. You wake up laughing, then you remember. Today, you're scheduled to transcribe spell 148, the long one, and you're all out of figs. You don't even bother tying your sandals this morning. What's the point? You'll just end up kneeling in resin, tripping over embalming tools, or sprinting after a baboon who's stolen your ink again. Today is spell 148 day, and that means one thing: suffering. Spell 148, for those lucky enough to have avoided it, is not only long, it's legendarily long. It's the rambling uncle of the Book of the Dead. It includes every protective invocation, every obscure god's blessing, and every single variant of, please don't smite this person's soul. It's like the magical equivalent of agreeing to the terms and conditions for the afterlife. And you, lucky soul that you are, get to write it in duplicate. Your workspace is a cramped chamber near the Temple of Hathor, where the walls leak humidity, the oil lamps flicker with bad attitudes, and the only table is tilted at an angle suspiciously similar to despair. The papyrus scroll you're given is a monster, nearly 3 meters long, coiled like a python that's been cursed with bureaucracy. You unroll it slowly, flattening sections with bronze weights and silent prayers. The fibers are already fraying at the edges. Of course they are. You begin with the traditional header: spell for not dying again in the afterlife. A real vote of confidence. Your reed brush is newish. You trim the tip with a flint blade and test the stroke. It bleeds slightly on the papyrus, like even the tools know what's coming. You start writing, slowly, carefully, one glyph at a time. It goes well for the first 10 minutes, until the humidity causes your ink to pool into a blotch resembling a very nervous duck. You blot, you scrape, you whisper apologies to both Thoth and ducks. Then comes the middle section: 47 lines of increasingly specific requests: protection from drowning, burning, being eaten by snakes, eaten by crocodiles, or eaten by snakes pretending to be crocodiles. You're not sure if that last one is metaphorical or just a weird Nile based paranoia. Historians still debate the origins of some of these lines. Did priests invent them wholesale? Were they regional superstitions? One theory suggests scribes just got bored and added whatever made sense in the moment. You don't blame them. Halfway through, your back is killing you. You shift positions, stretching one leg out behind you, the other still bent, like you're halfway into a hieroglyphic yoga pose. Your foot falls asleep, then your thigh, then your will to live. You pause to stretch and find a mysterious smear on your elbow. Ink, resin, bitumen, regret. You decide not to investigate. That never ends well. Then a priest bursts in, carrying a scroll like it's on fire. There's a change, he says. You blink. A change? To spell 148? He nods solemnly. The client's widow wants the part about serpents of flame replaced with doves of peace. You stare at him. Why? She thinks it sounds nicer. You nod. Client request. He sniffs. Sentimental nonsense. You smile politely and fantasize about turning into a raven and pecking his sandals. As you turn to leave, you pass a group of junior scribes squatting in the corner, practicing their ankh strokes on broken potsherds. One of them looks up at you with awe. You realize he thinks you're one of the greats, a master of ink, a chosen voice of Thoth. You don't correct him. Back at your scriptorium, your desk greets you like an old injury. Today's assignment? Painting ritual spells onto strips of linen to be inserted directly into a mummy's wrappings. These spells are more intimate, more personal, often customized with references to specific fears or life events. This morning's client is Lady Tasnet, age 67, allergic to figs, fond of ducks. You're not making that up. Her son dictated that to you last week while crying and eating cheese. You paint her name carefully across a linen strip in red ink, the color of divine energy, and also minor panic. Her personal spells request protection from darkness, snakes, and any demon with more than one mouth. You have questions, but you don't ask. You slip the finished strips into the scroll basket and move on to the next. A retired brewer who feared heights and his mother-in-law. You pause halfway through writing, "May he never fall," and wonder if the mother-in-law bit was metaphorical. You include a line about soothing female spirits, just to be safe. Historians still debate how individualized these spells were. Some say they were deeply personal, tailored by wise priests and careful scribes. Others say most were copy paste jobs with names swapped out like awkward party invitations. You, of course, do both because deadlines. As the sun begins to set, you rub your ink stained fingers and watch the last rays turn your scrolls gold. There's beauty in it, sometimes, between the blisters and the baboons, between the deadlines and the divine drama. You pack up for the day, only to discover your ink pot is missing. You glance around. The monkey is sitting on the windowsill, wearing your ink pot like a hat. He screeches, then hurls it across the courtyard. It shatters with theatrical flair. You sigh deeply. Maybe in your next life, you'll be a monkey, or a god, or both. This morning, you're crawling into a tomb. Not metaphorically, you're literally squeezing through a low stone corridor behind the mortuary chapel. Your reed brushes tied to your belt, your ink in a wax sealed pouch clenched carefully between your teeth. There are bats. There's dust. There's a smell that can only be described as ancient disappointment. Welcome to your new office. Today's task: inscribe a full funerary blessing inside the burial chamber of a minor official named Panifer. Panifer was a tax collector in life, and if the afterlife gives points for being unpopular, he's probably seated next to a demon with halitosis right now. The chamber is cramped, musty, and lit by a single sputtering oil lamp that casts more drama than clarity. Every shadow looks like a curse. The walls are dry but uneven, carved with rough guides where you're expected to paint hieroglyphs in between crumbling limestone patches. You kneel on the stone floor and immediately regret not bringing your extra mat or your extra spine. You begin with the traditional phrase, words to be spoken by the Osiris Panifer, and you can't help but chuckle at the formality. Panifer once tried to tax the temple cats. Osiris is probably still laughing. The ink behaves badly today. It bleeds on the wall in odd places, making your precise eye symbols look teary and slightly drunk. Your reed brush splits at the tip. You mutter something unflattering under your breath and immediately apologize to the air, just in case any wandering spirits are listening. Because that's the thing. Down here, the silence feels alive. It echoes, breathes, occasionally clicks. You tell yourself the clicking is just beetles. You hope. Historians still argue whether scribes working inside tombs were considered sacred artisans or just expendable labor with nice handwriting. Based on the conditions, you suspect the answer is both. You're expected to channel divine wisdom while dodging falling rock chips and beetles droppings. A spiritual experience with sciatica. Hours pass. Your brushstrokes become slower, more deliberate. The air thickens with incense remnants and some less identifiable odors. You take a break to stretch your legs, except there's no room to stretch, so you just lie on your side like a forgotten sausage and contemplate your life. You remember when you first became a scribe, how proud your mother was, how the elders said your hands were blessed by Thoth. Now your hands are mostly blessed by tendonitis and mysterious blisters. The gods work in mysterious ways. You finish Panifer's name twice, just to be safe, and begin the protective spell to guard his heart from betrayal. You realize you've accidentally reversed two glyphs, turning Guardian of the Soul into Soul of the Guardian. You decide that's poetic and move on. Halfway through drawing a depiction of the scale of Ma'at, your lamp flickers and dies. Just a whisper of smoke remains. pitch black. You sit in the dark for a long, long minute, listening, breathing. Eventually, you remember the backup lamp in your satchel. You fumble for it, light it with a spark stone, and try not to think about how long you'll have to stay down here if it also goes out. At one point, you swear you hear a whisper, but it's probably just the wind, or a bat, or Panifer, annoyed at your artistic choices. You finish the last line by the dim glow of the lamp, eyes gritty, knees numb, fingers stained red and black. The spell is complete. Panifer can rest. You, on the other hand, now have to crawl back out. You emerge into the late afternoon sun like a mole who's made some deeply poor career decisions. The light hurts your eyes, the dust cakes your throat, but the job is done. A priest meets you outside. He does not thank you. He does not even look at you. He simply nods toward the tomb and says, "Make sure the heart spell is centered." You tell him it is. It isn't. He leaves. You go wash your hands in a nearby basin, watching the red ink swirl like blood. Back at the scriptorium, you collapse onto your mat and stare at the ceiling. You dream of stars, scales, and Panifer yelling at a ghost about tax receipts. And when you wake up, you're scheduled for another tomb. This one has bats and scorpions. You spend the first part of the morning with a scorpion on your shoe. You don't realize this until you're halfway through your lentil porridge and feel an oddly divine tingling near your ankle. You glance down. It stares up. You both freeze. With the grace of a startled flamingo, you fling your foot sideways, launching the tiny menace into a nearby pile of linen. Somewhere across the courtyard, a junior embalmer screams. You calmly resume your breakfast, pretending you're not vibrating inside. Welcome to another blessed day in the life of a scribe. Your assignment? The Royal Animal Necropolis. Yes, you've graduated, temporarily, from humans to mummified pets. The High Priest of Bastet has requested funerary scrolls for 24 cats, 3 ibises, a baboon named Hetepi, and 1 crocodile who, judging by the sheer volume of spells requested, either saved a life or balanced a national budget in its day. You arrive at the animal embalming house, where the air smells like smoke, resin, and vague betrayal. Everything here feels slightly too quiet, like the creatures are watching from their linen shrouds, silently judging your handwriting. Your station is a rickety desk wedged between a stack of ibis jars and a wall fresco of cats, looking smug. Naturally, you begin with the cats. Each scroll requires the usual blessing: guidance through the afterlife, protection from demons, safe arrival at the celestial catnip fields. But these cats are royal, which means their names must be spelled precisely. Their titles must be included. Mouser to the High Priest, Royal Lapwarmer, etc. And their scrolls must be adorned with miniature illustrations. Historians still debate whether these animal mummies were seen as literal, spiritual vessels or symbolic offerings. You don't know. You just know you're currently painting a ceremonial collar onto a sketch of a cat that once peed in Pharaoh's sandals and somehow earned a pyramid chamber. As you work, your inkpot tips. Of course it does. You lunge to catch it, successfully preventing a disaster. Except in the process, you smear red ink across the ibis spell you finished earlier. The word for sky now looks like skull, which, depending on the belief system, could be a lateral promotion or a severe demotion. You rewrite the section. The ibis doesn't seem to care. It's dead. Next up is Hetepi the baboon. The scroll is long, ornate, and includes what appears to be a poetic eulogy about his dance routines during solstice feasts. You copy it dutifully, pausing only when you get to a particularly convoluted line that translates roughly to, He of the joyful buttock did summon cheer. You blink. You double check. It's there. You write it. Slowly. Carefully. Without smirking. Much. The crocodile scroll is last. It's nearly 2 meters long and reads like a legal document mixed with a fan letter. You're halfway through the fourth plea to protect him from being cooked in the field of reeds, when a gust of wind slams open the shutter and sends half your tools flying. Scrolls tumble, ink spatters, a cat mummy rolls off its shelf and lands perfectly upright on your lap, as if it planned this. You sit there face blank, cat on lap, scroll ruined, ink on your elbow, and think, this is fine. This is normal. This is your life now. Eventually, you gather the tools, re-ink the reed brush, and redo the sections. You add an extra blessing to the crocodile for unexpected gusts and falling papyrus, just in case. A priest wanders by and glances at your work. He raises an eyebrow at the baboon poem but says nothing. You suspect he recognizes the line. The day ends with you wrapping the scrolls into tiny bundles and placing them into clay jars, each sealed with wax and stamped with tiny figures of Bastet or Thoth. You whisper the final lines into each jar, unsure whether you're heard, but speaking them anyway. Back at your quarters, your hands are stained black. Your back hums with the ache of poorly designed furniture, and there's a faint imprint of a cat's paw on your forearm, possibly forever. You collapse onto your mat, exhausted. You dream of a baboon tap dancing on a sacred altar while cats chant in chorus, and a crocodile pours ink over your head in approval. And honestly, it's not the worst dream you've had. You wake up to a knock. It's not a polite knock. It's the kind of knock that says, you're being summoned. And no, you don't get to say no. You groan, sit up, and immediately regret both movement and consciousness. Standing in your doorway is a temple runner, barefoot, dusty, holding a scroll with all the ceremony of a banana peel. You've been requested, he says. Requested is a funny word. It usually means no one else wanted to do it. You follow him to the House of Healing, a place you've successfully avoided for years. Not because you're healthy, but because scribes in healing temples get the worst gigs. You're not translating the poetry of the soul here. You're writing amulets to protect people from intestinal demons and phlegm. Your assignment, a full protective blessing for a noble woman named Tia, who's dying. Probably today. Maybe before you finish. No pressure. The high priest of Sekhmet gives you the details. The woman is high-born, beloved, and, unfortunately, already halfway to the fields of reeds. Her family wants an emergency inscription for her burial wrappings, plus an amulet spell to tie around her neck. So you sit on a stool beside her chamber, surrounded by wailing relatives, pacing priests, and the sound of someone brewing lotus tea way too loudly. You dip your brush in ink and begin. Let her heart not betray her in the weighing. Let her breath remain steady through the flame. Let her soul pass unbitten by the serpent Apophis. Halfway through the fourth line, the room grows quieter. You glance over. She's gone. The priest closes her eyes. You bow your head. You don't stop writing. Historians still debate whether scribes working in these end-of-life moments were considered vital spiritual aides or just administrative staff with really good timing. But in this moment, you feel something shift. The act of writing the spell becomes heavier, like it matters, like someone's listening. You finish the scroll and hand it off to the embalmer, who's already muttering about linen shortages and whether they can reuse the amulet clasp from last week. You ignore him. Instead, you turn to the daughter, a quiet, solemn girl who thanks you without words, just a slow nod. You walk out of the house of healing and into the blinding light of the afternoon. The world feels jarringly alive. You hear laughter, a donkey brays, a baker shouts about sesame cakes, and still in your ears, you hear the silent echo of your brush on papyrus. Back at the scriptorium, a fellow scribe greets you with a grin. Good news, he says. You're not doing funerals tomorrow. You raise an eyebrow, hopeful. He adds, you're copying tax receipts. You consider walking into the Nile. Instead, you laugh, too loudly. It startles a cat. You settle down to copy a receipt for 6 baskets of barley delivered to the granary of Memphis. It's thrilling stuff. You spell out the date, the name of the tax officer, the quantity, and the weight of each basket, plus 2 whole lines swearing under oath that the barley was neither moldy nor stolen by rats. You pause before writing rats, remembering yesterday's monkey situation. You make the rat glyph extra crisp. Hours later, with the sun low and your patience lower, you sit back and stretch your spine until it audibly complains. The day has been long, the scrolls have been many, and somewhere out there, Lady Tia is being gently wrapped for her journey. Your words wound into the linen, each line like a thread anchoring her to the stars. You never met her, but your handwriting will travel with her forever. You fall asleep that night dreaming of stars shaped like glyphs, each one softly whispering your name. You wake to shouting, specifically a priest shouting your name like it's a curse word. Not the kind of alarm clock you wanted. You scramble up, nearly trip over your own scroll bag, and fumble with your tunic while the shouting grows louder. Where is the spirit strip for the baker? Oh no, you forgot. You completely forgot. Yesterday, in the chaos of barley receipts and deathbed blessings, you neglected to finish one small but rather crucial spell for the burial of the town's most beloved baker, and now said baker is lying half wrapped, while his widow screams that his soul will be eaten by crocodile demons unless he's sent off with the proper script promising eternal cake or something. You rush to your bench, grab your fastest drying ink, and start scribbling like your afterlife depends on it. Let the soul of Penty, baker of Thebes, be fed with eternal bread, never stale, nor burnt, nor stolen by gods or mice. You slip in a quick note asking that he be allowed to nap under shady fig trees forever, because that feels like something Penty would have wanted. You sprint to the embalming tent and hand off the strip just as the final wrapping begins. The priest glares at you, but the widow clutches it like a lifeline and presses it to her heart. You exhale, close call. Historians still argue how many scribes were multitasking across funerals, taxes, poetry, temple records, and chicken-related curses on any given day. The answer, you're fairly sure, is too many things, not enough figs. Just as you think you might finally get a moment to sit down, you're reassigned. Again, this time to teach. Apparently, a young noble's son has been deemed promising, which translates to his father donated to the temple, and now someone has to give this child a brush and pretend he has talent. You are that someone. You meet your new student in a shaded courtyard. He's about 8 years old, dressed in linen finer than anything you've ever touched, and currently chewing on the end of a reed pen. You sigh deeply. You show him the basics. How to hold the brush, how to grind the ink, how to avoid accidentally writing the word vomit instead of glory, which, yes, has happened. He listens. Kind of. Mostly he draws crocodiles, fighting snakes, and insists one of them is you. You remind yourself teaching is sacred. Even if your pupil is now calling you Scribe Poopbrush. Halfway through the lesson, he sneezes onto your practice papyrus. You calmly roll it up and throw it into the brazier. You're not paid enough to battle Pharaoh grade germs. At the end of the lesson, his tutor thanks you by handing you a basket of dried dates and a note promising possible future patronage. You suspect that's rich person code for "you'll never see us again." You return to your scriptorium just in time to discover that someone spilled fish sauce on your best scroll. You know exactly who it was. The monkey is back. He's sitting on your workbench with the kind of smug expression only creatures born to chaos can wear. You glare. He drops a fish head on your stool and flees. You stare at the scroll. The stain has turned the soul glyph into something that looks like a very confused onion. You sigh and begin again. That night, as you scrape dried sauce from your fingernails, you think about what all this means. The frantic pace, the ever-changing tasks, the sacred words written on rickety benches while dodging primates. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. But somewhere, someone believes that because of you, their loved one is resting safely in the arms of the gods. And maybe, just maybe, Penty is lying in the afterlife, surrounded by fresh bread, napping in the shade of a fig tree with crumbs in his beard and not a crocodile in sight. You sleep well tonight, even if the monkey has stolen your pillow. The rooster hasn't even thought about crowing when you're dragged out of sleep by a temple bell. This is rarely a good sign. You trudge through the pre-dawn darkness toward the temple's inner hall, half-dressed, wholly exhausted, and carrying your writing kit like a soldier gripping a rusted spear. A junior priest meets you at the door, eyes wide with equal parts awe and panic. "There's a misprint," he whispers. You blink. "On what?" "The vizier's coffin." "Oh no!" "The vizier. As in, second in command of the entire kingdom. As in, do not smudge his name, or your ancestors will feel the consequences." You follow the priest to the chamber, where the coffin sits gleaming in gold, inlaid with lapis, guarded by two cats who look unimpressed by everyone involved. There, on the lid, in brilliant red ink, is the offending line. You lean in. It's supposed to say, "He walks beside Ra in glory." It says, "He walks beside Ra in goats." Your stomach drops. The brushstroke that formed the word shed, glory, is slightly curved, making it read more like Shah, goats. It's a tiny curve, practically microscopic, but it turns the afterlife from divine triumph to barnyard comedy. You glance at the apprentice who wrote it. He looks like he's already mentally drafting his own burial spells. You sigh and set to work correcting it. With a mixture of vinegar and scraped gypsum, you gently buff away the goat and reapply glory, extra bold, extra divine. Crisis averted. Mostly. Historians still argue how often mistakes like this occurred in funerary texts and how many were caught before someone entered the field of reeds, accompanied by unintended livestock. You suspect it happened more than anyone wants to admit. After the correction, you're not allowed to leave. Oh no, now you're part of the official review team. They hand you a checklist the length of your arm. You're to verify every spell carved into the chamber's walls, every symbol on the sarcophagus, and every strip of mummy wrapping inscribed with protective verses. You spend the next several hours hunched over limestone, squinting at rows of hieroglyphs by flickering lamplight, occasionally muttering things like, "That's not a crocodile. That's clearly a loaf of bread." And "Who wrote, 'Let his nostrils never weep'? That's not a thing." Around midday, you're given a tray of dates and told to hurry up. You chew them slowly out of spite. Then comes the ceremony rehearsal. The visitor's family insists everything be done the proper way, which means you now get to perform the reading of spells you wrote 2 weeks ago, while priests chant, dancers spin, and someone plays a sistrum very enthusiastically off key. You stand beside the coffin, reading aloud the invocations of safe passage while incense chokes your sinuses and sweat drips down your back in steady rivulets. Your voice echoes in the stone chamber, solemn and clear, until the monkey shows up again. You don't know how he got in. You don't want to know. But there he is, crouched on a pillar, watching the ceremony with the deadpan expression of someone deeply unimpressed by bureaucracy. You ignore him. You keep reading. Let the heart of the vizier be weighed against the feather of Ma'at and found. The monkey screeches. You pause. And found true, you say quickly and glare at him. He chitters back like he's mocking your pronunciation. You vow to curse his next 3 incarnations. The ceremony concludes with everyone throwing lotus petals onto the coffin. You, unfortunately, are also pelted with several. You bow, step back, and try not to sneeze. By the time you escape the temple, the sun is low, the streets are quiet, and your feet feel like 2 bricks with regrets. You make your way home, where you collapse onto your mat and mentally review every goat-related glyph you know. You dream that night of Rhea riding a chariot pulled by actual goats, with the vizier in the passenger seat, looking vaguely disappointed. You wake up in a cold sweat, and you double-check your spelling, twice. You wake to find that someone has stolen your only good writing brush. It's gone. Vanished. The one you trimmed and reshaped over months. The one with just the right amount of flex. The one you silently referred to as old reliable. In its place is a sad, frayed reed that looks like it's been used to brush crocodile teeth. You spend a long moment staring at your workbench, trying to remember who you upset recently. It's a long list. No time to dwell. You've got a scroll to start. A commission from a wealthy noblewoman who wants her funeral rites written in Demotic and hieroglyphic. Double the writing, double the confusion, double the chances of accidentally wishing her soul be turned into a beetle. You sharpen a new reed. It splinters. Great start. The scriptorium is unusually loud this morning. A novice scribe is loudly debating with a temple guard about whether you can write blessings for someone who's only mostly dead. You sigh. This is your environment now. Funerary ethics, by committee, and no working ink brush. You finally get started. The scroll begins with the standard. May her soul fly westward with the falcon of Horus. May her name never fade. Nice, poetic, safe. But then comes the client's personal requests. She's written a list, a long one. Apparently, in the afterlife, she wishes to have a garden with 6 palm trees, a cat that never dies, 5 jugs of beer per day, a divine husband, but not the same one as in real life. You blink at that last one. You write it anyway. Historians still argue whether personal additions like this were meant symbolically or were actual metaphysical demands. You figure the gods can sort it out. You're just the pen. The demotic section flows faster, but your brush splits mid-glyph, causing rejoicing to bleed into itchiness. You scrape it clean and try again. The papyrus doesn't like it. Neither do you. By midday, the heat is unbearable. You wipe your forehead with a scrap of linen, only to realize too late that it was covered in red ink. Now you look like a priest of Set, or someone who took a nap on a cursed altar. You ignore the stares and keep writing. At one point, a senior scribe stops by to review your work. He peers over your shoulder, sniffs, and says, good margins. You beam like he just called you the hand of Thoth himself. He walks off without another word. Lunch is stale barley bread and a fig that may or may not have seen better centuries. You eat it anyway. You've made worse choices. Then a priest bursts in with another urgent scroll. A high ranking soldier who died suddenly and needs a quick spell bundle made before nightfall. You're handed a papyrus strip, a list of his titles, and the vague instruction, make it valiant. You write, let his spear not break, let his shield stand firm, let his soul strike truer than his blade. It sounds noble. You add a line about him defeating a snake-headed demon in single combat. Because why not? Let the afterlife be cinematic. The rest of the day disappears in a haze of ink, broken reeds, and whispered curses when you smear an entire prayer with the side of your hand. You start over. Again. As the sun dips below the walls, the scriptorium finally quiets. You sit in the dimming light, reading over your scrolls, and feel something. Not pride exactly, but maybe endurance. You're still here, still writing, still sending people off to the next world with their names wrapped in lines you wrote. Even if some of them requested beer on tap and husbands with better manners. Back at your room, you find a surprise. Your missing brush, tied to the doorframe with a strip of linen. Next to it, 3 date pits and a tiny handprint in ink. You glare into the shadows. Monkey. No reply. You take the brush, clean it gently, and fall asleep clutching it like a sacred relic. You dream of palm trees, bottomless beer jars, and a very smug cat who keeps correcting your spelling. The sun isn't up yet, but you are, because you've been summoned to the cemetery of forgotten names. It's exactly as cheerful as it sounds. You arrive with ink, papyrus, and a very strong sense of foreboding. The cemetery is where unfinished burials go to linger. People who died without family, money, or scrolls. Some are buried in reused coffins. Some have none at all. Most have no name, which, in your line of work, is about the worst fate imaginable. Today's task is grim. Write provisional afterlife spells for 7 individuals buried anonymously last month. No names, no biographical details, just linen-wrapped bodies and a faint smell of dust, myrrh, and melancholy. A priest explains they must not be forgotten. The gods require a name to call. If we don't know theirs, invent something that fits. You stare at him. You want me to make up names for the dead? He nods. Make them beautiful. So you sit beneath a sandstone arch, surrounded by 7 clay jars, and begin to write. Let the one called Seferti be known to Osiris. You imagine Seferti as a weaver. Quiet hands, sun-worn skin, laughter like papyrus rustling in wind. Let Henmut rest beneath the stars and beside the Nile. You picture her as a singer, someone who hummed lullabies to the sick and never missed the first bloom of lotus season. Each name you give feels heavier, more intimate. You're crafting identities out of thin air and ink, hoping that somewhere beyond the veil, someone is listening. Historians still argue whether these rituals were symbolic or spiritually binding. Did the name itself carry weight in the afterlife? Did the gods honor invented names? No one agrees, but here's what you know. You've never written more carefully. After each line, you fold the papyrus into a strip, seal it with red thread, and place it into the corresponding jar. The priest chants softly behind you. A wind kicks up, dry and sudden, rustling the reeds and tugging at your sleeves. By the 7th scroll, your hand is trembling. You write, let the one called Nebu, silent in life, be heard in eternity. You pause. Something about it sticks, echoes, You don't know why. You just feel it in your chest like a remembered song. The jars are sealed, the tomb is closed, and you return to the land of the living, with your shoulders 10 pounds heavier. Back at the temple, the scribes are arguing about ink quality again. Someone insists that crocodile bile produces better color depth. Another swears by pomegranate juice. You walk past them without a word and pour yourself a cup of cold beer water, staring into it like it owes you answers. Then comes a new assignment: Royal Birthday Scroll. You blink. Excuse me? Yes, the runner says, holding up a lacquered request scroll. The pharaoh's cousin's son is turning 7. They want a commemorative birthday spell. You reread the assignment. It is, in fact, real. You must write a blessing scroll for a child's birthday in poetic form, featuring Horus Ra, a lucky frog, and an inspirational moral about not poking bees. You sit down and get to work. May your sandals never wear, your frogs never flee, and may bees find flowers, not your knees. It scans, it rhymes, you're not proud of it. Then the priest overseeing the job adds, "Oh, and draw a crocodile juggling fish." You stare at him. He stares back. You sigh and draw a crocodile, juggling 3 fish and a bread roll. Because why not? That night, you're too tired to eat. You fall into bed fully clothed, scroll ink on your chin, and dream of a marketplace where everyone has the wrong name and keeps asking you where to find the afterlife's lost and found desk. And somehow, you're the one in charge. You wake to rain, which is absurd because it's Egypt and it's not supposed to rain. Not like this. The sky has cracked open. The gods are apparently washing something important, and your scrolls are in immediate danger of becoming very expensive soup. You leap from your mat, scramble to cover your papyrus stash with a reed mat, and yell incoherently at the monkey who has dragged an ink pot into the courtyard and is now conducting a rain ritual of his own. You swear he's learned sarcasm. The roof leaks. The walls weep. Your sandboxes are soggy. This is your least favorite weather, panic seasoned. A messenger arrives soaked to the marrow, scroll in hand. Another assignment, of course. This time, a military commander has died in the southern frontier, and his body, along with a very moldy jar of beer and a half-cracked statue of Horus, is being shipped up for burial. You're to prepare his funerary scroll before the barge docks. You have 3 hours. You groan. This commander's name? Menti Ra. Known for winning 3 battles, losing 4, and blaming all of them on weather or bad omens. The scroll must present him as a hero naturally. The gods don't accept mostly brave in the afterlife. You write, "He who stood alone upon the dunes, whose arm did not falter, whose shield sang in the sun." You cross out sang and replace it with shone. Shields don't sing unless enchanted. You pause, add it back. Now he's got a singing shield. Fine. Historians still argue how much exaggeration was permitted in funerary texts. You suspect the rule was simple: make them look good enough to get in, but not so amazing they annoy the gods. You add that Menti Ra once tamed a sandstorm, just in case. Meanwhile, the monkey is now perched on your shoulder, watching you write, eating a fig he clearly stole. He offers you half. You decline. Just before noon, you rush to the temple docks to hand off the scroll. The rain has slowed to a drizzle. The commander's barge is more wreck than vessel. He arrives in a makeshift coffin, half covered with fish scales. You try not to judge. The priest glances over your scroll and grunts. A bit dramatic. You smile sweetly. So was he. You're dismissed with a nod and a fishtail slapping against your ankle. You take that as a benediction. The afternoon brings another delight. backcopying the Book of the Dead again. This time you're reviewing Chapter 30b, The Heart Spell. You've copied it 64 times. You know it by memory, cadence, and muscle twitch. Oh, my heart, do not rise up to testify against me. You whisper it aloud as you write. A calming chant, a slow breath, until you accidentally skip a line and end up writing, "Oh, my heart, do not rise up. Offer cheese." You blink. You backtrack. You correct. No one can know. You wonder briefly if there are scrolls buried out there with similar errors. Does some ancient soul now wander the afterlife offering cheese to jackal-headed judges? You kind of hope so. You spend the last hour of daylight checking for water damage and hanging papyrus sheets to dry. One scroll curls into a perfect spiral. Another is now permanently tinted pink thanks to the monkey's secret stash of pomegranate juice. You sit back and look at the chaos and laugh. Not a full belly laugh. More like the wheeze of a person who's accepted that ink, rain, monkeys, and dead commanders are now the pillars of their reality. That night, you finally get a hot meal. Not great, but not burnt. You eat it slowly while rereading a scroll you wrote weeks ago. The lines are crooked. The grammar is flawed. But the spell holds. You feel it. And you wonder if, somewhere beyond the desert, there's a soul who remembers your brushstroke, who followed your words into the dark and didn't feel alone. That thought stays with you as you drift to sleep, warm, dry, and for once, unbothered by primates. You wake to silence, which is worse than shouting, worse than chaos, worse than monkey mischief, because it means something is wrong and nobody wants to say it out loud. You shuffle into the temple courtyard, squinting into the pale morning haze. A few scribes linger near the papyrus storeroom, speaking in hushed tones. One sees you and waves you over. There was a break-in. You blink. A what? In the archives. You feel your stomach drop into your sandals. The temple archive is sacred. It holds hundreds of scrolls, some centuries old, contracts, funerary records, royal decrees, ancient poems that no one reads but everyone pretends to revere. It's heavily guarded, usually dry, and smells like dust and dignity. You're led to the scene, two broken jars, footprints in the sand, and, most insulting, a partially unrolled scroll left on the floor, trampled. It's one of yours, not your best work, but still. The priests are rattled. The guards look like they'd rather face actual demons. No one knows what was taken yet. So you're drafted, again, to help identify missing scrolls. You spend the next 6 hours cross-checking inventory lists with surviving bundles, inspecting watermarks, brush signatures, and brittle fibers like some forensic papyrus detective. You discover 3 scrolls missing. One land deed, one prayer to Hecate for fertility, and one funerary spell meant for a merchant named Bakra. The last one stings. You remember Bakra. Kind eyes. Gave you a date cake while you were writing his scroll. Wanted his wife's name added, even though she'd passed years before. And now his scroll, his safe passage, is gone. You don't say much. You just copy a new one by memory. Slowly, carefully. This time, you add an extra line. Let no hand defile what was written in love. You sign it with a flourish you never usually bother with. Not for vanity, just defiance. Historians still argue whether scrolls held intrinsic spiritual power or were merely ceremonial. You know better. You've seen families breathe easier after reading your words, seen eyes close peacefully once a line is spoken aloud. It matters. As you leave the archives, a novice runs up, breathless. You've been summoned to the palace. Of course you have. You arrive dusty, tired, and still vaguely ink-stained. The palace courtyard smells like honeyed wine and obligation. A steward hands you a scroll. You're to write a dedication for a new obelisk. Something inspiring, but not too poetic, and easy to carve. You ask how many lines. They say one. You stare. One line to summarize the glory of Pharaoh, the divine order, and the eternal kingdom? Correct. You sigh and sit in a shaded corner, chewing on the end of your brush. You try a few options. His light shines longer than the sun. He who stands between earth and sky, built by the will of Pharaoh, beloved of Ma'at. Eventually you land on, he raised stone from silence, and the world listened. The steward approves, barely. You wonder if anyone 1,000 years from now will still be reading it, or if someone like you will be trying to fix a chisel error where silence became salad. You return home with sore feet, an aching wrist, and no dinner. The monkey has eaten your leftover barley cake. You write one last line before sleep. Today, I rewrote a man's soul and summarized a king. You smile just a little. Then, you dream of scrolls that can't be stolen, stone that speaks, and a merchant sailing through the stars with his wife, their names floating behind them in lines of glowing ink. The next morning, you're assigned to something different. Not funerals, not taxes, not scrolls for long dead nobility or vague birthday blessings for children with too many cousins named after Ray. No, today you're writing a curse. Now, before you get excited, it's not one of the dramatic ones where a statue's eyes bleed or frogs rain from the ceiling. It's an official temple disapproval document, which is a fancy way of saying someone ticked off the high priest and now must be immortalized in scorn. Your target, a grain merchant named Huy who sold moldy barley to temple kitchens. You're handed the assignment with very clear instructions. Make it firm, make it elegant, and above all, make it stick. You sit down in the corner of the courtyard, a patch of sun warming your legs, and begin. Let the name of Huy be known to the gods as one who fouled the bread of the righteous. Let his grain turn to dust. Let his profits be as empty as the jar he cheated. You pause, satisfying. You add a line for flair. May he spend eternity counting spoiled seeds with no ledger to save him. A junior priest walks by, reads it, and chuckles. You feel oddly proud. Historians still debate the actual power of these temple curses. Were they legally binding or just symbolic flexes? You suspect both. Symbolic and effective, especially when word gets around that your name is being recited aloud by angry scribes with very sharp ink brushes. After delivering the scroll to the disciplinary chamber, a room that smells suspiciously like old onions and regret, you return to your desk, only to be handed a love spell. The whiplash is real. Apparently, a local noble's daughter has fallen in love with a temple musician and wants a scroll to make her case to Hathor, goddess of beauty and slightly unwise decisions. You start the spell. May his eyes find no joy but her gaze. May his ears hear music only in her voice. May his knees grow weak in her presence. Though not so weak, he falls over. You smile. You enjoy writing these more than you care to admit. Love spells are half poetry, half flattery, and 1/4 extremely hopeful exaggeration. You include a tiny drawing of 2 lotus flowers twining together, which will probably be misinterpreted, but that's part of the fun. By midday, you're re-inking your brush when a temple cat leaps onto your desk and sits directly on a half-dry curse fragment. You try to shoo it. It does not move. Instead, it curls up and starts snoring. You write around it. Later, a request comes in from a fisherman who wants a blessing for his boat. You prepare a quick scroll, promising calm waters, strong nets, and fish that don't smell too much like failure. By sunset, you've written 6 small scrolls, one decorative amulet inscription, and a very odd spell meant to protect chickens from the evil eye. You're not sure the evil eye even cares about chickens, but someone's paying for it, so you write, "May the rooster of Teti stand proud. May no gaze shrink his crow. May feathers flourish, unplucked by envy." That night you sit on your mat, legs crossed, scroll bag beside you. The monkey is asleep in the corner, draped in linen like a small furry priest. You gently unroll one of your early scrolls, just to look. The ink is faded, the strokes uneven, but the words are still there. You smile, because some days you write to protect a soul, some days to honor love, and some days to make sure no one messes with temple chickens. And somehow, all of it matters. You drift off as the last light fades, the hum of cicadas blending into your breath, and the distant thought that tomorrow will be ink-stained and imperfect, but it will be yours. You're halfway through brushing sleep from your eyes when someone bangs on your door shouting, "We need your best handwriting." You snort. You're about 2 cups of beer, too early for compliments, but it's not a joke. The high priest himself has requested your services. Apparently, he's preparing a scroll for a foreign delegation visiting from the Levant. They've brought gifts, gold, incense, exotic birds that keep biting the palace guards. In return, the temple is offering them a ceremonial scroll of welcome, beautifully written, of course, and translated into 3 languages you barely understand, so no pressure. You're ushered into the temple's inner scriptorium. They hand you freshly trimmed papyrus, a reed brush made from imported cedar, fancy, and a rough draft written by someone who clearly thinks graceful prose means lots of long, unnecessary adjectives. You take a deep breath and begin. To our honored friends from beyond the eastern sands, may your path be smooth, your trade fruitful, and your camels always cooperative. That last part gets a raised eyebrow from the translator. You grin. You add a drawing of clasped hands below the final line, a stylized symbol of peace. Then, with extreme care, you trace the hieroglyphs in flowing black ink, letting your wrist follow the rhythm you've memorized after years of muscle memory and mild carpal misery. It's your cleanest work in weeks. Even the priest murmurs, which coming from him is essentially a standing ovation. Historians still argue whether diplomatic scrolls were written for true peacekeeping or just to show off local calligraphy. Today, you're voting for both. As you pack your kit, one of the junior scribes asks, "How do you get your lines so straight?" You reply, "Shame and repetition." Then you're handed your next task, because, of course, this time it's a dream journal. You blink. Apparently, the son of a wealthy merchant has been having disturbing dreams involving baboons playing the sistrum, a headless crocodile chasing his lunch, and an ibis that speaks in riddles. His father wants a written record, hoping the dreams can be interpreted by a sleep priest, or failing that, framed on a wall for psychological intimidation. You transcribed the boy's tale, and lo, the baboon turned to me and said, "Do not trust the fishmonger." You pause. You whisper to yourself, "Honestly? Fair." You keep writing. Then the ibis asks me, "What does a feather weigh when the heart is hungry?" You're beginning to think this kid is either a prophet or severely dehydrated. After finishing the scroll, you roll it carefully and seal it with wax shaped like an eye, for style. As you're leaving the merchant's house, he offers you a small basket of honey cakes. You accept, with grace. and the appetite of someone who hasn't had sugar since the monkey fig incident. That evening, you finally return to your room, where a pigeon has somehow gotten in and is sitting directly on your best inkstone. You chase it out with a sandal, then collapse on your mat with a groan. You nibble a honey cake, stare at the ceiling, and think, today you welcome diplomats, decoded a bird dream, and didn't spill ink on anything important. That's basically a holiday. You fall asleep imagining baboons in wigs, speaking in riddles, shaking tambourines. One of them looks suspiciously like the monkey. You don't question it. You just keep walking in the dream, one scroll at a time. Today begins, as all important days do, with a chicken. More specifically, a chicken on fire. You're halfway through breakfast, 2 dates, and a piece of bread that could qualify as a weapon when a novice bursts into your scriptorium yelling, "The purification ritual went wrong." The incense caught the offering table and there was a chicken. You stop him with a raised palm. "You want me to write the incident report, don't you?" He nods, breathless. "Of course." So you sit down with a fresh sheet of papyrus and begin the latest installment in your unofficial series, Temple Accidents No One Will Believe. At the second hour of the morning, during preparations for the cleansing of the inner court, a miscalculated flame from an incense brazier set alight the edge of the offering table, startling the sacrificial chicken, which proceeded to flee the scene, partially aflame. You pause, causing moderate panic among the junior priests, significant damage to ceremonial linens, and deep emotional distress to one cat. You end the scroll with the all-important phrase, "Blessedly, no deities were harmed in the process." Historians still argue how much truth is preserved in temple records like this. You suspect just enough to avoid future lawsuits. Once that drama simmers down, your next assignment arrives wrapped in perfumed linen. That's never a good sign. It's another funeral commission, this time for a perfume maker. His widow wants an elaborate scroll describing not just his virtues, but the scents that defined his life. You read her instructions. Mention the aroma of blue lotus, the warmth of cedar oil, and the way he always smelled faintly of myrrh and optimism. You blink. You sigh. You write, "Let the scent of sweet resins accompany him through the field of reeds. Let his spirit rise on lotus winds, his feet bathed in oils, his memories carried in fragrance no sand can bury." It's one of your prettier scrolls. You include a small painted border of perfume, jars, and drifting incense. When you deliver it, the widow bursts into tears and kisses your hand. You freeze, then awkwardly pat her on the shoulder. Human emotions are more terrifying than any curse you've written. Back at the scriptorium, you're greeted by a new decree. Inventory season. Yes, every scroll in the temple archives must be counted, recorded, and inspected for wear. All of them. You and 3 other scribes are assigned the South Wing, home to some of the oldest, dustiest, and most questionably translated texts in existence. You spend the next 6 hours sneezing, sorting, and trying to decipher things like prayer to ban fish from the afterlife and coffin etiquette for tall people. At one point, you find a scroll titled Thoth's Secret Recipes, which turns out to be mostly herbal tea instructions and a suspicious note about lentils. You laugh, quietly. The best part? Among the stacks, you find one of your own scrolls from years ago, still intact, still legible, still with your early signature, where the R looks like a duck tripping over a basket. You smile and leave it be. As the sun sets, your hands are stained with dust, your legs ache from crouching, and you've inhaled enough mold to become part papyrus yourself. But your heart? Weirdly full, because even the smallest scroll, even a funny fish band prayer, means someone once believed enough to write it down. You leave the archive last, whispering goodnight to the shelves like old friends. And when you return to your room, the monkey has drawn something on your wall using stolen ink. It's you, holding a scroll. You squint. You're riding a donkey. The donkey is wearing a crown. You decide not to ask questions. You fall asleep under the gaze of monkey modernist mural work, dreaming of scented winds, flaming poultry, and ancient recipes for tea that promise to calm all unquiet souls, including your own. You awake to the sound of chanting, not the soft, melodic kind. This is the grating, slightly off key version that signals someone has roped in every available temple novice to rehearse a ceremony they barely understand. You peek out your window. Yep, it's festival day, the feast of the beautiful reunion, when Hathor travels upriver to meet Horus at Edfu, and everyone pretends they haven't been up all night carving palm fronds into decorative spears. You, however, have the distinct pleasure of providing ritual captions. That's right, scrolls, banners, mini scrolls for dancers to wave around. Poetic, they said. Flowing, but legible, they added. Also make it rhyme in both hieratic and hieroglyphic. You seriously consider becoming a potter. You arrive at the temple courtyard, where chaos reigns. Dancers twirl, goats bleat, someone's juggling fruit for reasons unknown. A priest hands you your first assignment. Banner for procession. Must honor Hathor, mention love, include something about cows. You take a breath. You write, she who wears the stars and feeds the sun. Her eyes are joy, her hooves do run. May her beauty bless this day begun. The priest squints. Can we swap hooves for something less barnyard? You hand him the reed brush. Be my guest. He doesn't. So you continue. Your second scroll is trickier. A hymn to be read aloud during the offering. You craft it carefully. O Lady of Gold, wearier we are, but in your dance, we forget all scars. Bless this bread, this beer, this scent, and the priest who spilled everything when he bent. It gets a laugh. It stays. Historians still debate how much humor was tolerated in religious writing. Based on today, the answer is more than you'd think, as long as the beer keeps flowing. By midday, the heat has turned everything into soup. Your ink runs, your robes stick. A donkey eats part of your first draft. You take a break under a fig tree, where the monkey joins you, dragging a stolen garland of flowers and wearing it like royalty. You don't question it anymore. A temple musician wanders by, flute in hand, and you find yourself scribbling lyrics on your leg so you don't forget the tune. The line that lands? She dances like the Nile at dawn, pulling joy from dust. You hum it under your breath for the rest of the afternoon. Near sunset, the final task arrives, a commemorative scroll to record the day's events for future generations. You are, once again, history's reluctant court reporter. You write, on the 12th day of the month of Pani, the people gathered, the drums sang, the priests staggered slightly, and all was joyous under Hathor's gaze. You pause. Add, one goat escaped. The monkey took the offering bowl. Still, the rite was considered successful. And at the bottom, your tiny, almost hidden mark, a duck tripping over a basket. As the crowd disperses, as laughter fades into the warm dusk, you sit on a stone bench and let your legs dangle like you're 7 years old again. You look up at the stars just beginning to show and wonder how many scrolls you've written by now, how many names you've recorded, how many hearts you've guided, how many jokes you've slipped in just to see if anyone would notice. You smile because one day some future scribe might stumble on your work, brush the dust away, and read your words aloud. Maybe they'll laugh. Maybe they'll wonder who you were. Maybe, just maybe, they'll feel a little less alone in the world. And for a moment, under the slow wink of a desert star, you feel almost eternal. The temple is unusually quiet today. No dancers, no goats, no frantic scribes arguing over ink density. Even the monkey is calm, curled up beside your reed brushes like he's guarding them from mischief, including his own. You're alone in the back chamber of the scriptorium, surrounded by finished scrolls bundled in neat stacks, each one tied with red or black cord depending on its content, blessing or binding. The air smells of dried lotus and worn parchment, a calm, musty kind of sacred. Today's assignment isn't urgent. It's personal. A fellow scribe, Tefnut, passed away last night. Older than most, wiser than all. She once corrected your hieroglyph for eternity by flicking your ear and calling you ink-stained optimism in sandals. You admired her. You still do. The priests have asked you to write her funerary scroll. And for the first time in a long while, your hands hesitate. You dip your reed. You begin. Let Tefnut's name be carried on the breath of Thoth. Let her words, shaped in life, guide her in death. Let her pen not falter, her scroll not tear, her passage be lit by the ink she once poured. You pause, you swallow, you continue, you list her deeds, years of service, scrolls copied, errors caught, wisdom shared like bread. You include her favorite spell, one about a crocodile who forgets why he's angry, and a line she once whispered after a long shift. No one notices a perfect line, but they feel it. You write that too. Historians still argue whether scribes wrote their own funerary texts in advance. Many did. Tefnut didn't. Maybe she trusted someone would do it right. You're trying. You add a prayer to Seshat, goddess of writing. Bind her name in your stars. Let her ink never fade. You finish with a border of tiny quills, one of them shaped like a feather falling. You deliver it at sunset, placing the scroll beside her Shabti figures. The priest reads it aloud. No embellishment, no edits. Just your words, her journey. After the rite, you return to the scriptorium. You sit in the same spot she used to claim out of habit. It feels quieter than before. You find a scrap of parchment under the desk, tucked behind a jar of dried ochre. Her handwriting. It says, "Don't forget to eat, or sleep, or laugh when the ink spills." You stare at it for a long time, then you chuckle, because today the ink did spill, and you did laugh, and tomorrow it will again. You tidy your brushes, you stack your scrolls, you pat the monkey's head. He snorts softly but doesn't wake, and then you rest your head on the desk and let your breath slow. The room is still. The air hums faintly with candle wax and memory. You feel the soft rustle of papyrus under your fingers. You imagine the stars above scribbled with ancient verses, each one written by someone like you. You whisper, "Let the words go on." And they do. And now the ink dries. The scrolls are rolled, stacked carefully, tucked away beneath sandstone shelves and behind doors that creak with the weight of memory. Outside, the desert wind curls softly through narrow alleys, warm and whispering like a lullaby wrapped in sand. You're still in the scriptorium, but everything's slower now. The monkey's gentle snore is the only sound, rhythmic and oddly reassuring. The candles flicker lower, casting gold shadows over the walls. Shadows, shaped like reeds, cats, feathers, forgotten gods with kind eyes and terrible spelling. You've written enough today, enough for the living, enough for the dead, enough for the stars. And though your back aches and your fingers are stained with yesterday's mistakes, there's something quietly beautiful in it all, in knowing your words mattered, that someone, somewhere, made it to the afterlife with your lines etched beside their soul. The papyrus curls slightly in the cooling air. You rest your hand on it, just once. A soft goodbye. Outside, the stars gather, not to dazzle, just to keep watch. They've seen this scene before. 1,000 scribes, 1,000 scrolls, 1,000 silent moments just like this, where ink met soul and story met sleep. So let it go now. Let the ink dry. Let the night settle. You did well, little scribe. Close your eyes. The words will be here when you wake.